Criminal Minds is back for its final season, and it is not good. The episode opens with a guy going to a mansion in the suburbs and calling someone inside of it. This is going to be important later. For now, all that matters is that he finds an art book with a picture of a dead guy with a skinned torso inside the mansion, and then gets murdered in the same way. Next, we get a check-in with the cast and Reed's crush on JJ, and then we see that David is working under the assumption that the face-off killer from last season is responsible for skinning men and leaving their bodies in the woods. The evidence against his theory? The face-off killer only kills women, hides his crimes by burning down houses, and doesn't operate in this part of the country. The evidence for? Both crimes involved skinning, and David has a hunch. Here's a scene of David trying to justify his new profile, which basically serves as a case study for why profiling is kind of garbage.
And now that he's on the run, he's uncomfortable in his own skin. And he's transferred his violent compulsion from women he hates to men he envies.
See, but the evidence doesn't fit his theory, so instead of admitting he's wrong, he warps his profile unrecognizably. This leads to everyone going along with Joe's theory, which makes no sense for them to do. JJ and Reed go to see the latest body out in the woods, and in a sign of the show's dwindling budget, on the next day they go and find another body in the same woods. There's no reason for the same two characters to go to both dump sites, other than that means you can film both scenes in the same afternoon. Luke and Matt also go to the coroner's office twice for the same reason. Speaking of the coroner, I was sure that he was the killer, because he's incredibly incompetent and keeps screwing up the investigation. But no, he's just bad at his job. The other Emmy is the killer. Even after they've identified the victim, they don't simply check his phone records to see where he's been. A check, mind you, that would lead them right to the killer's lair. No, instead they whine about how the killer is finding men on a dating site, but not contacting them through it, so he's untraceable. So here's what we're asked to believe. A random guy is on a dating site, expected to be contacted through it. Suddenly he gets a text message or email from a mysterious 60-year-old man with no way of knowing who he is, who says, "Here's a first-class plane ticket. Fly to Baltimore and come to my mansion." And all three guys who do this are like, "Yup, that sounds legit. I definitely won't tell anyone where I'm going." Also, it's never addressed who rented the car that the victims drive up to the house in. If it was the killer and it's a rental, then that car also has a record of where the killer's lair is. If it's the killer's, then you have to imagine that he's driving it to the airport and leaving it in the lot with the key hidden away on it. And that doesn't seem plausible either, because it's another giant red flag to the guys who were flying in. Just to be clear, I want to make sure that there's no easily traceable record of you coming to my house. For no reason. The team decides that David is wrong about Face-Off being responsible for the crimes, and Emily assigns him to prepare to interview Grace, Face-Off's daughter, when she arrives at the Justice Department first thing tomorrow morning. Garcia finally comes up with a useful clue. All of the plane tickets were bought with the previous victim's credit card. It takes a weirdly long time for Garcia to figure out the identity of the first victim, given that his face and fingerprints were completely intact, and he has a driver's license. It seems that the first victim's ticket was bought with a credit card owned by the lawyer who owns the mansion that the killer is hanging out in. Speaking of the killer, he was doing all of this to build an Ed Gein-style man-suit to cover up his horrible chest. Also, this episode is set in a bizarre world where human skin can be cured into leather in less than a day. And he kidnaps the other coroner because he doesn't care at all about getting caught. The next morning, as the team plans to raid the mansion, David tries to tell Emily about something he found while researching doctors instead of prepping for the Grace interview like he was supposed to. She tells him to drop it and orders him to go see Grace. Here's what David found out. That the Face-Off killer's mother had dated this killer for years, and that he and the Face-Off killer knew each other really well. You couldn't take 3 seconds to tell her that? No, instead David disobeys a direct order and goes to see the killer at his house. Meanwhile, the team busts into the mansion and finds plenty of evidence that the Emmy is the torso-skinning killer. We get a confusing tribute to Silence of the Lambs when the killer goes from his murder den to answer the door, revealing that his killing and skinning parlor is in his own house, which suggests that the killer lured the guy to the mansion, killed him, dragged his body back to his home, did the skinning, dragged the skinned body back to the mansion, took that photo, and then dumped the body in the woods. All in the same night? That seems like a stretch. David beats up the doctor and asks what the Face-Off killer wanted with him, and the doctor reveals that the Face-Off killer wanted to steal a lawyer's identity so that he could rescue his daughter. Okay, now things get real dumb real fast. The Face-Off killer steals a gun, which is, for no reason, locked next to the completely unguarded prisoner interview area, and the key to unlock it is held by the person whose gun it is, which is basically the same as just letting them keep their gun. The face-off killer shoots his way out of the building, killing 4 people along the way. While this is going on, the team has arrived downstairs and is setting up a perimeter. Due to the aforementioned budget issues, there are no other cops around. Let's think about this for a moment, though. The face-off killer's escape rampage takes approximately 5 minutes from stealing the gun to confronting JJ in the basement. When Joe found out the plan, he was in the Baltimore suburbs, yet he arrives at the Justice Department while the shooting is still going on. Even if we're being charitable and guessing the doctor lived in a southeastern suburb like Columbia, that's a 20-minute drive, assuming Joe could double the speed limit and encountered 0 traffic. This means that there was a 15-minute window in which Joe could have simply phoned up the Justice Department, told them that the most wanted man in America was in the building, and given them the name he was there under, letting them arrest him without incident. He didn't, though, because having a face-to-face confrontation with the face-off killer was more important to him than other human lives. Speaking of, JJ gets the drop on Face-Off and Grace, but proves to be the most incompetent cop in the world and gets shot for her trouble. So yeah, just a terrible start to the season. Before we go, I'd like to leave you with a thought. Before raiding the mansion, Emily ordered David to go and interview Grace. If he'd done that, he would have been in the building when the face-off killer arrived. He would have recognized him instantly and arrested him on the spot. To be clear, because David disobeyed a direct order, 4 people died and JJ got shot. And anyone the face-off killer murders in the future is also on him. You're terrible, David.